So this transitions us really well to our panel discussion on autonomous vehicle safety as well as consumer acceptance. As you all know, autonomous vehicle technology has attracted significant attention in the last 20 years because they hold the potential to transform the transportation industry, reducing accidents, improving mobility. And starting from 2004 DARPA challenge, as Ed mentioned, the 2009 Google X autonomous vehicle to the peak of autonomous vehicle investment in 2016. And then in the last few years, many of the deployment projects with Waymo, Cruise, May Mobility, Aurora, and a number of companies has starting their deployment. As technology continue to be developed and be maturing towards to deployment, the most important concern on autonomous vehicle are still focusing on their safety. And every sector involved in autonomous vehicle deployment has interest in terms of safety. And these are from stakeholders such as government agencies, from consumers, from autonomous vehicle developers, and also from infrastructure operators, and last but not least, the academia as well. So today we assembled a distinguished panel to discuss this important issue, and our panelists comes from include representative from each of the sectors I mentioned above. So just to briefly introduce our panelists, Tony Geara, currently the the Deputy Chief of Mobility Innovation in the City of Detroit, and Kathleen Rizk, the Senior Director of User Experience Benchmarking and Technology at J.D. Power, and Steve Lesh is the Vice President at Aurora for hardware operations. Todd Fronckowiak as Vice President of Safety at Cavnue, and Bogdan Epureanu is the Roger McCarthy Professor of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Michigan, and Bogdan is also the Director for Automotive Research Center, which is a U.S. Army-funded Center of Excellence. So in the following, I'm going to have each panelist to give 5 minutes opening remark, and we will enter the conversation. Start with a set of questions I will ask, and then we will open up for Q&As with our audience. So let's start with the opening remark from each of our panelists, and we want to keep the opening remark within 5 minutes. And so we're going to start with Tony.
All right, I had a number of slides here, 21 to be exact, and you're going to ask me how are we going to go through 21 slides in 5 minutes, and my answer to you is by telling you a story. The big question, or the big value that I add, I have to kind of stay here because I don't have a clicker for now, but the value that I add to this conversation is probably not as technical as 99% of the people in this room. You guys are the brains of what's coming up next in terms of AV and AV testing. What I do bring to this room is a story that you may not see on a daily basis of how we balance out and how we bring the city of Detroit from what we do today to potentially a future of automation and automated vehicles of whatever form that looks like. Ed did an excellent job at giving us all these different modes of transportation. But the big question always remains on what we do is, why do we need automation? Is it to just have this futuristic looking robot helping students cross the street or deliver food? From where we stand as the city of Detroit, it always comes down to safety. And apologies, this is a very disturbing video. In case you guys are not comfortable, you can close your eyes for the next 20 seconds. But essentially, safety is our #1 concern when it comes to our residents. We do have a number of different crashes. We did see a huge increase during COVID for the crash rate. At some point, we had 200% more roadway fatalities during the months of June, July, and August of 2020 compared to the previous year. And then the other element that we have to deal with is definitely mobility equity and ensuring that people can get around. So the reason why we have buses, and sometimes with 5 riders and sometimes with none, is because we need to ensure that people can get to where they need to go whenever they need to get there. And we need to start thinking about this transit, this mobility solution as such. So we need to ensure that people can get there. And if the bus is empty for 2 or 3 hours of this day, that's fine, because we need to ensure that everyone can get wherever they want to get. And I just want to point out that Detroiters, they used to walk 21 miles wherever they want. Of course, there are other things like mobility independence, access, jobs, etc. But what do we need to get to that next era? And then from a city perspective, of course, the biggest one is legislation, making sure that we're getting the right laws, the right contracting with our partners. I know that May Mobility is one of our, we are one of their clients. But to get to that point, it took us almost a full year worth of contracting, going back and forth to find out that fine balance between privacy and what's going on. So again, it's a complex problem. The landscape is very diverse. We're not going to go into all of those, I promise you. But what I do want to tell you is we do need talent. We need talent on your side, so you guys can bring in the STEM, the know-how, the technical information to be able to solve these problems. But we also need talent on our side. I need project managers that know what they're talking about and they can manage these projects forward. And it starts with some of the newer generations, such as Square One, who does an amazing job in building the automation, electrification knowledge of high school students that are going into college. We need to engage and listen, and we do that really well at the City of Detroit. We have a department dedicated for that, the Department of Neighborhood. Every single project we have, there's a big chunk of money that goes towards us listening to our residents. In this particular case, I'm probably going to focus on our ADS project, Automated Driving Systems. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a few minutes during the session. But we listened and we understood that people feel more comfortable right now with having a safety driver in the vehicle in cases of emergency, especially for older adults and people with disabilities. Now, there's always listen, and there's always a healthy level of skepticism. You'll see that every social media post will have its people that are supporting you and people that will kind of stand up and say, you know what, there are other solutions out there that will cost, 1/100th of the cost. But for us to kind of get ready for the next era, we put a collaborative together with the University of Michigan, and I'm very, very honored to say that we had a number of other different partners that you see here, ranging from OFME, MEDC, University of Michigan, Wayne State, and many, many more. We could not have done this by ourselves. We selected an area within Detroit. We realized limitations of space and linear miles of AVs right now. We want to make sure that we're maximizing that from what we've heard from our residents. We did all the different elements of trying to tie in our problems with our solutions, and then we went ahead and tried to kind of implement those. There were some universal truths that we documented, and we learned a ton from it. And we realized that safety kept on coming up time and time again. And that's why we are testing at the University of Michigan, at M-City and ACM, to be able to ensure that that vehicle can deliver the promises that it's putting out there. Now, I just wanted to give a quick briefing. We're just about to launch, so be ready for a June launching. This particular service is for older adults and people with disabilities, but in parallel, we have another AV circulator or solution that's being deployed for another element that will overlap with this one. So it will increase mobility, and it will be able to connect east and west downtown Detroit for multiple different purposes. So we're trying to address this in multiple different ways. I'm going to stop my introduction at this point. Please feel free to go to our landing page under this link. And I want to leave you with this quick thought. Hopefully the video has audio. And if it does not...
I'm excited to ride some more.
All right.
Somebody who said they weren't going to never...
Let me give you some quick context. I just got off a self-driving shuttle during a ride-along, and I asked our riders, how did it feel? I'm going to play one more time. You don't need to see my LinkedIn or anything else at the end. This is the most important thing for me. So I'm going to play this, and then we'll transition to the next person. Oops. Let's try this again.
It drove like I was
It was
driving.
smooth.
Hey, I said, oh, this will work here.
I'm excited to ride some more.
All right. I'm excited to ride some more.
Who said they wasn't gonna never get in one?
Take me somewhere.
She thought she'd never So get into did you one. say that? You're never going to get in
When
one?
they first talked about the news a couple of years ago, I said, oh, that won't be Julia. She ain't never getting in one.
Okay.
So,
We
but
need a long trip.
I must have had
Maybe at least another 5 more minutes. Like to Cracker Barrel. Like to the airport. Cracker Barrel.
So I'm going to pause it there. Brenda in the wheelchair said she thought she'd never ride into one, and now she wants it to go to the airport, to all these different areas, and they're very excited about what's coming. One of the comments there that you may not have heard is it drives just like I would, and that's exactly what we want to get to. So we want those cars to drive like us and better without the distractions. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Tony. And next we'll have Cassie.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity today to be part of this panel discussion. In my job, I work with advanced vehicle technologies, and I work with our mobility studies at J.D. Power. So my goal today is really to represent that voice of the customer and help share a little bit about what we know customers think and feel about fully automated self-driving vehicles. So as part of our studies where we track what's going on with this type of technology is our Mobility Confidence Index study. And in this study, we look at, what are some of the barriers for customers in terms of, for consumers in terms of acceptance of this technology, and what is their current level of comfort with the technology. So you can see on this chart here, we create an index from 6 different metrics in looking at whether they're comfortable riding in the vehicle, whether they're comfortable sharing the road with it, whether they're good with people transporting goods with this type of technology. And when you look at this chart here, you can see there's 6 metrics in total that go into this 100-point index. And you can see that for the most part, consumers are more comfortable with this technology being for other uses than themselves. So they're more comfortable with it for goods or for people who can't drive than they are for themselves. And one of the other things about this finding that we show here is the fact that it's trending downward, and that's concerning, right? So we're showing you for the last 2 years across all 6 of our metrics, the trend has been going down in terms of comfort with this technology. And so we asked consumers as part of this study, so is there anything that's affected your level of comfort in the last year that's the reason why you've rated it the way you have? And what they've come back with is no surprise, right? They're hearing these stories about accidents, about, robo-taxis blocking intersections or stopping abruptly, and that's resonating with them. So, as an industry, we have to balance this, that we need to actually be testing this technology on the city streets around the fact that this is where consumers are getting their knowledge about this technology. And one of the concerning things about this is we know that at a point it's going to balance off, because when we keep sending that same message to consumers, right, their opinion's going to be formed and they're going to start tuning out some of these stories, and it's going to be very difficult to kind of raise the bar and improve their confidence in this technology when they start to tune out what's going on with this technology. One of the other things that I brought today for this introduction is from our Tech Experience Index study. So this study has 80,000 participants every year, and they're new vehicle buyers, and we survey them after 90 days of ownership. And in this study, we look at 40 different technologies, but we include a lot of lower levels of automation. And we know that that experience with lower levels of automation significantly impacts consumer acceptance of AVs. So on this chart here, I just wanted to kind of break out 2 groups and give you an example, but if we look at the braking technology, whether it's the warning or it's the intervention, we see that consumers are having a difficult time with forward AEB versus reverse AEB. So in this study, we look at problems that are happening with the technology, and we look at satisfaction across various metrics. And in this one, I'm showing you trust. And consumers have more trust with the reverse AEB technology than forward AEB. And when you look at this, you start to wonder a little bit why, because in our data, they report twice as many problems with reverse AEB than they do with forward. And the problems, of course, are false positives, too many warnings, but they're more forgiving with this technology because it fulfills a need. They understand that they do have a blind spot backing up, and so they see a value in this technology. When they look at the forward collision, the comments we hear is, there's warnings going off, I can see the car stopping in front of me, I understand I need to slow down, but the vehicle is intervening too fast, whether it's a warning or actual intervention. And so we see the significant difference in trust in that forward technology than we do in the reverse. And so this is just one example of how, trust in these automation of technology is impacting consumers. And one that's a little more closely related, right, to AVs is our active driving assistance and our lane support technology. You can see that at the bottom of the chart there. So in this instance, you can see that the satisfaction in terms of trust for this technology is actually relatively low. And when they look at this technology versus the braking technology, they feel this is a convenience technology. It's not a safety technology like they see reverse AEB. It's not solving a problem for them, right? It's just helpful, that it can keep you in the lane, but they've been driving in the lane for many years, right? So they don't see this as filling a need like they do with reverse AEB. And what happens with this technology and what we're seeing happen with AVs is the fact that they don't understand this technology. So when we do a lot of work with DOTs and we're looking at, how do we get people to use this technology and use it properly so that we have more safety, improved safety on the roads. And what happens is they don't understand, in the example of active driving assistance, what combination of technologies might be required in order for it to work. They don't understand what speed in which this technology works. They don't understand the reaction of the vehicle when the lane markings aren't present. And they don't know the limitations. So they think this works in all weather conditions, whether the lane markings are there. And in the end, what happens is that consumer has a poor experience with the technology. And then when we ask them to move up and say, well, are you comfortable with even higher automation? The answer, it tends to be no, because they don't have this foundation yet of comfort with lower levels of automation. So this is one of the barriers for consumer acceptance of higher levels of technology. Higher levels of automation. So on this last slide, I won't take the time to go through this, but we have this trust ecosystem and all the industry stakeholders play a role in this. And I talked to you a little bit about consumer experience in this, but it actually affects a lot of things like safety standards and liability and data privacy and security. And all of these, again, are the foundation for customers to accept lower levels of automation in order for them to accept fully automated self-driving vehicles. So as part of my discussion today, I will be talking a little bit more about other barriers that we see from our studies in terms of what's necessary to improve that comfort numbers I was showing you on the first slide.
Thank you, Casey. Next we have Lesh from Aurora.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Henry said, my name is Steve Lesh. I work at Aurora Innovation. And Aurora's mission is to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. And in order to do this, we're developing a AV software stack and hardware that can be integrated on a variety of vehicle types. Safety is obviously one of the key things that we're focused on. And in order to verify that a vehicle is safe on a public road, you need to have a solid safety case. Our safety case has a number of claims in it, but they're really organized around 5 key pillars. One, that the vehicle is proficient and able to drive in ordinary circumstances. The second, that it's fail-safe, it's resilient to faults in the system, It needs to be continuously improving, it needs to be resilient to misuse, and it needs to be trustworthy. Now, if you're going to develop a safety case, you need to have all kinds of evidence that backs up the claims that you're making are correct. And some of that evidence may be that you have a safety management system within your company. But the bulk of the evidence is squarely around the heart of today's topic, which is how do you do AV safety testing? This is the primary way that you're generating the evidence to show that your safety case is valid. So let's spend a minute and talk a little bit more at a high level about how Aurora looks at AV safety testing. We believe in a multimodal approach, combination of road and track and simulation. And as you may know, I guess fortunately, the most dangerous events tend to be very rare on the road, and so you may never encounter them even if you're driving millions of miles and testing. So it's necessary to have a simulation capability that can not only replay what you've seen on the road in simulation, but can also create new scenarios. Speaking for a minute about those super rare scenarios, the ones that you never encounter on the road, our approach is to synthetically generate events. We actually use NHTSA's collision taxonomy, which enumerates all the types of collisions that you can get into. We create simulations of those, and then we create permutations of those simulations to test our software. So just a really easy example here in the larger picture, a very dangerous event that's fortunately, again, super rare. A vehicle stopped in the lane on a highway, and the Navy was going to come up upon that very, very quickly and has to deal with it. Some of the permutations then that we create in our simulations are, for instance, what if that vehicle's in a different position in the lane? What if that vehicle happens to be in a construction zone so that the truck is actually navigating around cones as the lane markers instead of lane lines, or the road's at a different curvature, and so on and so on. In addition to software testing, of course, we do extensive hardware testing, and as Henry said in the introduction, I'm actually a hardware guy at Aurora, so this is my favorite space. And for that, there's a lot of industry-proven, in the automotive industry, testing methodologies for validating that hardware can perform in its operational domain. The other part of this session today is, of course, consumer acceptance, and it's really important that the communities where autonomous technology is being utilized are comfortable with it, that government regulators who are responsible for keeping our roads safe are comfortable, and of course that the customers of the technology are comfortable. A lot of Aurora's focus is around heavy trucking, and so our customers tend to be different than the customers some of the other panelists have been sharing that tend to be people who are going to ride in the vehicle. Aurora's customers are actually freight companies who need their 53-foot trailers moved from one location to another. And so we tend to approach customer acceptance with them in four key ways. The first is observation, and in fact, this is how big trucking companies today evaluate their drivers. They have trained safety drivers who ride with new employees. They watch them operate the tractor trailer, and they determine if they're able to operate it safely. And we have that same program with the Aurora driver where they can observe the Aurora driver driving. Secondly, we provide comprehensive information on how the vehicle will handle incidents. So even if your truck's not responsible, if there is a collision, you're now dealing with a situation where you don't have a human from your company at the scene. And so sharing with customers how Aurora will manage that. We do quite a bit of communications with customers around the safety checks that happen pre-mission. So what are the safety guidelines that the company follows when our tractor hooks up to their trailer load to transport it from a terminal? And finally, we provide metrics for safety on mission. So there's transparency, not just in the loads that we're pulling for a particular hauler like FedEx or Werner, but what our overall safety record is. So I've gone through this rather quickly, touching on safety, on testing, and on consumer acceptance, and look forward to expanding this discussion with the fellow panelists here later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Professor Bogdan Epureanu from University of Michigan.
All right, so thank you very much, Henry, for the introduction, and thank you all for attending this discussion. My name is Bogdan Epureanu. I'm also the director of the Automotive Research Center, And I know some of you are familiar with the ARC, but some of you might not be familiar with it. So I want you to take a couple of minutes to just give you a few key highlights about the center. In the United States Army, there are 2 centers of excellence sponsored, led by universities. One is focused on rotorcraft and one is on ground systems. We are the United States Center of Excellence on ground systems. We focus on modeling and simulation in particular. And we do this with the goal of addressing military needs that are very urgent. One of the very important aspects is to achieve performance as well as affordability, and do that very quickly. So we work on methodologies to accelerate development technologies and adoption of new technologies at the speed of relevance. We also are very much concerned with the safety of warfighters, whether it is in peacekeeping operations, disaster relief, or it is in combat operations, by keeping them at a safe distance from dangerous areas, by enabling autonomous systems to reach these hard-to-reach areas. And another important element that enables all these factors is adaptability to the changes in the situation on the ground, adaptability to the military requirements. And we do that in particular with a particular focus on autonomous systems when we are trying to develop technologies that help not just autonomous systems like vehicles, but also their teaming, their working together as a teammate with humans. So in that very broad context of need that the military has, we have a specific mission to focus on things that are complementary to what commercial companies are focusing on. And so we are addressing things that are dual technology, but focused on vehicles that might be operating in much more complex environments than a structured environment in a city. It might be off-road operations. It might be in an uncontrolled environment. And the vehicles that we deal with need to operate not just on paved roads and so forth, but in a variety of terrains, right? In off-road conditions, soft soils, etc. And they have to do this while also being able to show adaptability and show the capability of teaming with humans to achieve complex tasks. And that is because these vehicles face adversarial threats, and they also have constrained fuel supplies. So this is the mission that we have. Within this context of the mission, our focus over the past about 3 years has been development of off-road mobility and operations, of heterogeneous teams of humans and adaptable autonomous vehicles. So you can think of groups of vehicles and groups of humans that are working together, not all vehicles being identical, and they're operating off-road. So in order to achieve this, we have various capabilities. We are a consortium of 14 universities that contribute to this. We have extremely talented researchers. In fact, Dr. Olson, Ed Olson, was a PI in the ARC quite a few years ago before May Mobility, or right at the start of May Mobility, I would guess. He can please correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think it's about that time. But anyway, at the University of Michigan in particular, we developed capabilities for development of autonomous vehicles that are very heavily focused on modeling and simulation with experimentation for verification and validation. So we work on high fidelity off-road simulations, on technologies to validate synthetic sensors versus real sensors, methods to convert real worlds into synthetic worlds, so we can do modeling and deploy modeling and simulation tools to study safety or study performance of different systems. We develop control and navigation algorithms for off-road applications on soft soils, and we work on adversarial scene generation to basically identify those edge cases that are very important and much harder to find in unstructured environments. Another element that I mentioned is the fact that we are studying humans that work together with vehicles in achieving different tasks. So for that, we have capabilities of studying interactive, immersive activities for off-road autonomy. In particular, we have a fleet of physical vehicles that are M-Razors. There's a Polaris Razor model for sort of ruggedized. And we, of course, interact with humans in simulation where we construct synthetic environments. We use digital twins, simulators, and so forth. In effect, what we do, we create a bridge between real and virtual. So in our studying of various systems at different levels of complexity, we can push the boundary between what's real and what is synthetic in our studies to enable fast technological deployment and adoption. So with that, I think I will stop here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Bogdan. Our last one is Todd Fronckowiak from Cavnue.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Henry and the team for inviting us and getting this panel together. I'm really excited about our discussion today. So as Henry mentioned, I'm Todd Fronckowiak. I'm the Vice President of Safety at Cavnue. A longtime automotive guy, been in one of the big three in the area for over 30 years. After that, I joined the self-driving industry, and now I'm with Cavnue. And if I can figure out how to move this, I'll explain what Cavnue is. So for those of you who don't know, Cavnue is a technology company, and we're bridging the gap between physical and digital infrastructure. And our goal is to make transportation and mobility safer, more efficient, and more effective. So we'll see how much coffee everybody had this morning by jumping right into an eye-straining chart here. I'll have to assume it's up there because I can't see from back here. But starting on the left side of this, you kind of have our end user. So let's focus on who would be using our information. And you have transportation management centers, road operators, and the various information that they could glean from our corridor and our networks. You also have road users. So trucks, vehicles, could be human drivers or automated drivers that would also benefit from the insights and information we can provide. So let's jump to the right side. The right side, you kind of have some pictures to show our technology. So we are installing poles. Those of you who are in the area might be familiar with I-94 westbound, just west of 275. Between Belleville and Rosenville Road exits, we have our first proof of concept. It's a 3-mile stretch of a dedicated express lane with our technology installed. So what we do in our technologies, on our poles we install high-def cameras and radar. We use those sensors to collect information of the real world and create a digital twin. And then we share that information, and we have the ability to do direct communications as well as cellular network communications. We also add, I'll just mention that when collecting that information, we also have edge computing as well as some cloud computing to supplement that. So what does it offer? So when our equipment is installed, it's the entire length of a corridor. Some of our projects are going to be upwards of 30 miles long. So we have insights on the entire length of that corridor. So here's a couple concentric circles or ellipses of maybe a typical ADAS system and their perception range of that technology. With our system, you could easily provide the whole corridor, but that probably wouldn't be helpful information. It'd be too much for anything to compute. But you can provide much greater information well beyond the line of perception of a human driver using our eyesight or an ADAS or even self-driving system. So what do we do with that? So we observe, as I mentioned, we observe the real world. We create the digital twin. We draw inferences from that information using our algorithms. We can highlight incidents. We can highlight traffic flows, changes in traffic flows. We can highlight aggressive driving. And then we share that through it, and we call it advise. So observe, infer, and advise. Our advice could be to the transportation management centers in some cases, others, and as the more and more connected vehicles hit the roads, then we can share that also directly with the vehicle and the vehicle technology itself. Here's just one example of a incident detection. So there are some national statistics that for like a transportation management center typically takes them 15 minutes to become aware of an incident on a freeway. Transportation Management Center obviously aren't the first responders, but they're the ones who can manipulate the flow of traffic, adjust the flow of traffic to help avoid things like secondary impacts when you come up to over a hill and you come up and the freeway stopped in front of you. With our technology, we can lower that down to minutes, if not seconds, so we can notify a Transportation Management Center of a stoppage in the freeway. In addition, we can also provide 911 or the Transportation Management Centers who work with 911 and first responders detailed scene information, how many vehicles are involved, how many ambulances might they need to send, for example, where exactly they're located, is it safe, is it blocking traffic, all that kind of information. We have lane level precision that we would be able to share regarding a significant incident. In addition to providing advance notice to either human drivers or automated drivers that up ahead, well beyond what you can see right now or around the curve, there's a stoppage, and you can prepare to either stop or maybe change your course. And this is just my last slide. So some of the use cases that we are currently working on and developing, we have the full Cav lanes, and that's the proof of concept that's currently on I-94 westbound right here in the state of Michigan. We also have digital corridor management, so that's more not a dedicated civil lane or express lane. That's more just managing the flow of traffic, working closely with the transportation management centers, 6 lanes both directions, and providing insights as to how traffic is moving or if there are issues on the road. And finally, another use case we're working on is our drayage network. So you have dedicated freight moving, transporting dedicated routes, moving cargo boxes and the like from one point to another. Doing this 24/7, our goal would be to do this with self-driving trucks. And with it, that's my 5-minute intro.
Thank you,
Thank
Todd. I'm going to bring all my panelists on the stage, and so that they have a comfortable seat, and then we have some conversation. So please. Again, thank you so much for serving on the panel, and this is a very diverse panel, distinguished members, and from each sector. So I have lots of questions on my list, but I'm not going to ask them all, and I'm going to start with a question from my side, and then I will start with, we will go with our Q&As from the audience. I know you have questions too. So I'm going to start with Tony. We've been working together on the Detroit autonomous driving system demonstration project together. And what are some of the City of Detroit's big picture lessons that you think are transferable to other cities during the deployment?
That is a great question. And there are a number of different things that we've learned, as you're aware. But as things that are from a city perspective, specifically kind of go to the element of contracting from that perspective, getting things moving forward. Because we're doing this for the first time as a city, and maybe first time in the United States in certain cases, we tend to find ourselves in a situation where there haven't been 20 or 200 contracts in the past that were done, and we're having to recreate those. And then in parallel, we have to balance it out with, I don't want to call it archaic ordinances, but ordinances that were built for the regular world, not this futuristic, innovative world. And we have to work within those boundaries to be able to move things forward. And then we have to balance that out always with safety, and of course with our residents' needs and the request for privacy. And that is a very important element for Detroiters, but also for everyone around us. We want to ensure that the data that is being generated, et cetera, is being handled with utmost responsibility on our end, and that is being reflected contractually, and then the right message is being relayed to our residents, and we're keeping that level of transparency. So I feel like I've learned a ton of things under each one, but if I had to kind of summarize it, I'll put it under that big umbrella.
Thank you, Tony. I have a question for Casey. Casey, you talk about level 1, level 2 features for the vehicles and the trust and usefulness issues together with these vehicles. And what are the other barriers you think to overcome the consumer acceptance for autonomous vehicles, particularly for the higher level of automation?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that we talk about quite a bit is how do we educate consumers on this technology? And I know, there's a lot of organizations like PAVE that are trying to take this initiative. But what we find is that so far in what we're tracking in our study is that it's not really resonating well with them. So in our study, we have definitions of different levels of automation, and roughly, a third of people actually get that definition right, and we really haven't seen a change in that. And one of the things that are interesting about that is the fact that we ask people, like, where do you classify yourself on the scale in terms of knowledge about AVs? And we have people who say they know a lot about AVs, yet when we look at the data, only a third of them actually pick the right definition. So I think even when we see that at lower levels of automation, that's why we see people misusing technology like Tesla, who, they think this technology can do way more than it can. So even these people who claim to be knowledgeable are not truly understanding it. And then another thing really is around the definitions we use. So when we look at definitions, whether it's L2, L3, or L5, consumers are not really resonating with these definitions. So, what we're using as industry jargon just really doesn't sit well with them, and they really have a tough time between L2 and L3, and that's really going to be critical that they can quickly take back control in an L3 vehicle versus an L2, and understand in that L2 vehicle that they need to really be paying attention. Some of them do allow to take their hands off the wheel, but when they can't understand these definitions of what that capability is, and they can't resonate well with the different naming conventions, that really creates a barrier. And I know J.D. Power, we work with Consumer Reports and IIHS, along with other organizations, to try and standardize what these names are being given to the different technologies, because we want the industry to start to use those names to help consumers understand that. And then another barrier is really safety. So part of the study, we asked consumers, so if you don't have to drive anymore, what would you like to be doing in the vehicle? And what features do you need to support that? And we get the typical things like creature comforts, right? They want seats that recline to all different positions. They want a refrigerator where there's cold drinks. And even if it's a service vehicle, they want to be able to buy, beverages in the vehicle. And they want large screens. But one of the interesting things was the safety features. So even though that isn't an activity, the primary thing they wanted to do in that vehicle was sit and watch the road. So they wanted to make sure that they were still somewhat in control, right, and not relaxing in the car. And so they were asking for things like put airbags all around them, not just, in the front seat, right? They wanted to be surrounded by airbags. They wanted an emergency brake that they could pull. They wanted things like automatic hazard lights so that if the car did stop in an intersection, they didn't get rear-ended. And then they wanted other features like access to 911, a quick button they could push, or an OnStar type collision notification in case they weren't able to actually push that button. They wanted things like a safety driver where they could also access that safety driver if they're not in the vehicle, right, but having someone who could remotely control the vehicle, whether that's possible or not, right? And they wanted backup equipment. They wanted a steering wheel and a brake pedal and accelerator for a period of time, right, until they're more comfortable with that technology. And just lastly, two more barriers. One that's really becoming important is data privacy and security. So hacking of that vehicle is really in the forefront of consumers' minds. They're very concerned, and every day they see something's being hacked, whether it's their bank account or their health information, and they don't trust the fact that these vehicles are going to be safe. And they want to hear from the government, and they want to hear from the manufacturer, what are you doing to prevent this vehicle from being hacked? And then what are you doing with my data? What data is being collected? How is it being stored? What is it being used for? And really, why do they have to opt out instead of opting in, right? So they feel like they have no choice in this. They have to figure out how to opt out of this and have their data be more secure. So we see this data privacy issue across, all of the features that we're looking at. It's really rising to the top as something where the consumers want improvement. And we've asked them, what type of information would you like, would you be comfortable sharing? Would it be your speed that you're going? Would it be, your blood alcohol level? Would it be your location? And they don't want any of it shared. And they don't, even for an incentive. If they offered some type of incentive like an insurance discount, it doesn't really move them in terms of being more comfortable sharing that information. And then just lastly, but probably most importantly, one of the barriers, as I mentioned in the beginning, is that consumers are not hearing from people who have actually ridden in these vehicles. And last year we did our first robo-taxi study where we looked at, in Phoenix and San Francisco, we talked to people who actually rode in a vehicle and people who see them or live with them on their city streets every day. And the people who actually rode in a robo-taxi had a very different experience than what we're hearing on the news. So yes, there are incidents occurring, and we expect that, right, as this technology is being tested. But these people had a really positive experience for the most part. We did not see much negativity around that experience. And so they're critical ambassadors for this technology, but we're not hearing enough about it from them so that consumers can start to balance out some of the issues that are occurring during testing.
Well, that looks like consumers' concerns, really wide range of concerns, not only safety, but also privacy, the comfortability in terms of the autonomous vehicles. So I have move on to a question to Steve. So a key safety capability for autonomous vehicle is fail-safe situations for in the presence of hardware and software faults. So what are the key elements of the fault management system for testing, for AV testing?
Yeah, thanks, Henry. I think a lot of attention in the AV space is around the primary function. Can you detect and avoid the pedestrian, the vehicle stopped in the road? Can you detect a siren and take the right action? But equally important is AV testing around the fault management system. So can a vehicle detect a fault and transition to a safe state? And I'll give this example maybe in a hardware context. It's very analogous for software testing. But we really think of that in three key parts. So the first is testing around the ability of the hardware to detect faults and report them. Most of this testing happens either at the board level or in hardware-in-the-loop rigs because you have to be able to inject the fault that then the hardware system is detecting and reporting. The second piece is around the mapping. In other words, when you detect a fault, are you able to communicate upwards into the stack? This is what the fault is, and the stack recognizes, okay, given that fault, this is the safe action that I need to take. And the third is the ability of the vehicle to actually take that safe action given it's now driving with the fault. And so, for example, you might have a radar fault, and the safe action in that case in the mapping is you need to pull the vehicle over to the shoulder of the road, and then you need to do extensive testing to verify that the vehicle can, in fact, do a pull over to the shoulder maneuver without that radar functioning. So do you have enough other types of sensors, overlapping fields of view, and other things? And that testing, this capability to drive to get into a safe state in integrated mode actually then starts to look very much like a normal testing where you're using simulation and permutation to look at all the combinations of things that could occur, for instance, when you're trying to pull to the shoulder, and then verifying that you can actually do that given that part of your vehicle system is now in a degraded state. So it can be quite comprehensive, but it is a key pillar of an overall safe operating vehicle.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. I have a question, then move on to Bogdan. So Safety issues oftentimes result from human autonomy interactions. And from research perspective, what research you think in this area can enhance the safety and also the trust for autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, thank you very much, Henry. Indeed, the perspective that we have in the Automotive Research Center is influenced by the fact that we are thinking of very extreme conditions when humans will work with vehicles to accomplish complex tasks. So the trust that is necessary in those conditions is very important. And this trust can be built only if there is a bidirectional understanding of each of the agent's actions, that is the human or the autonomous system. And in that context, what I would like to say is that it's not just about the vehicle as a system, but we in a vehicle, we interact with autonomous subsystems that are communicating with the human. For example, the active driving, driver assistance technologies, right? So that lack of communication between the system and the human creates a unpleasant experience for the human. So that's why we believe that, and we study this in the arc of modalities of interaction. It's very important to understand what are the modalities of interaction between the human and autonomous system. Can we have additional information from additional sensors about the human state, their cognitive workload, their engagement with the system, so the autonomous system can make decisions informed by the human at that moment in time rather than just generically. It's also about collaboration. So we don't think of autonomous systems as just being directed by the human to do something, but we think of them as a teammate. So they can help the human do better, and the human helps them do better. They work together as a team. Those are very difficult concepts that I think are at the forefront of research in understanding how to improve human autonomy interactions in general. And it's particularly important for safety and trust issues.
Yeah, trust is such an important issue. It's not only just consumers' trust to autonomous vehicles. One of the projects we've been working on in the last few years on a smart intersections project, looking at how create a trust between vehicles and infrastructure. So that leads to my next question for Todd. You provided some examples in your introduction, but how else can digital infrastructure can help and improve the autonomous vehicle safety?
That's a great question. The vehicles, I would argue, being an automotive person, are safe and getting safer. They're smart and getting smarter, but roadways really haven't changed their design in 50 plus years. What we're trying to do is understanding that OEMs are designing safe systems independent of digital infrastructure, is that with those insights, learning and trusting the information from like a digital roadway, that they would leverage that information to make their vehicles even better, hopefully safer, but at a minimum, even more comfortable. So we talked about incident detection, and the goal there is to turn a potentially unsafe situation into maybe a slight delay, right? That would be ideal, right? The system, whether it be the human driver, the automated driver, have plenty of time. They're knowledgeable of an incident ahead. They can start slowing down, changing lanes, changing routes, and turn that into just a slight nuisance. Some of the other things we can do with the system and are developing is health monitoring. So if we have complete eyes in the sky over like a 30-mile stretch of the corridor, there's a lot of work and a lot of effort, a lot of money put into ensuring the upkeep and maintenance of that freeway, to even understand that the pavement's breaking down or things like that. With our system and constantly monitoring, we can notice those changes and highlight and automatically alert those changes. So there's a pothole developing. There's a guardrail that's been damaged. There's signage that blew over. We can notify that, and so they don't become hazards to people on the roadways, get that information to the people who can then send crews out and remove those potential obstacles. Another example that I'm actually pretty excited about is what we call safety hotspot learning. So using our software and our analytics, We can track things that have been very challenging to track in the past, like near misses, or aggressive braking, or the outlier excessive speeder. And you can plot those and locate where those are occurring. You provide that to a DOT, now they know exactly where they need to intervene with various methods or things to help control speed or to maybe help the merging of traffic by extending an on-ramp, things like that. But normally that takes months, if not years, to collect that type of information. We can provide that information in weeks, if not days, once we have that.
Thank you, Todd. I have another set of questions for each of you, but I think in the interest of time, I'm going to open up for questions from the audience, and we'll see how far I can go, and then I can ask my questions too.
I have a question for maybe Tony and Stephen, because I think my question may lie in both AV developers and the government agencies. So my question is basically, before the AV, we are really deploying it to a large city like Detroit. How can we make sure it is safe enough or satisfactory to be deployed? And also, after it is deployed, AV can be like OTA updated over the air. How can we still make sure, okay, it is still safe enough to be deployed after the updates? So that may be for both AV developers and government agencies. Thank you.
Steve, I'm not sure if you wanted to take that first, or do you want me to? Go ahead. So I'll just speak to, the city does not have, again, all this talent that you see in this room. It does not have all the talent that you find in Aurora and Cavnue, et cetera. So we depend on the knowledge and the experience that comes from these companies that are potentially like May Mobility, that's providing the services that are there. However, just like everything in life, like when you woke up this morning and you drank your water from the tap, there's some guidance, governmental, federal guidance that came and said you can have so many, ppms per whatever for different types of chemicals in there that will ensure that you're safe. I think we need to think about this perspective similar to what is happening with AVs. There needs to be some guidance to what is the level of safety that is there. But then more problematic, I would say, I think it was alluded to earlier, is those definitions and how do you test for it in a standardized fashion, so that when you say this vehicle is safe to do all these maneuvers, well, that's great, but then is it safe to also operate in a real world? So my answer to you is, right now, there may not be very clear guidance, and we need to go in that direction. For us, for the ADS project, we've invested a ton of money, and a ton of money from our partners as well, many of whom I see in this room as well, into testing and ensuring that this vehicle is checkmarked. We're not licensing it. We're not saying but we're saying that it has passed, in the hopes that in the near future there will be something standardized for us to move forward. Now, on the other hand, we're also having the safety driver behind the wheel, so that redundancy and potential safety for the time being is the way for us to go. We didn't want to repeat other cities' mistakes potentially by going a little bit too fast. So we see the human backup as the near future solution until we have more confidence in the technology itself. However, we're keeping the conversations open, we're keeping the pilots open, we're applying to a lot of different grants because we want to continue the legacy of the previously known motor city, now the mobility city. We want to ensure that we're doing it forward well and forward safely.
Yeah, I fully support everything Tony said, and obviously I think the burden from a proof standpoint is on the AV developers to provide the safety case and the evidence. But let me maybe take a little bit the second part of your question, which was how do you ensure that the vehicle continues to be safe? So it's safe on the initial launch, but now you've made a small software update to fix a certain feature. How do you know that it's safe? And really the answer there is you have to have an in-depth ability to do regression software testing. That requires that you be able to test at scale, and so at least Aurora's approach is, and by the way, this is like industry available software. We use a tool called JAMA. There's many others where you're basically able to link your complete requirements database to your software testing. So when you run a software regression test, you're not just testing against the particular feature that software over-the-air change is going in to fix. You're actually going back and testing against your complete requirement set and basically ensuring that you're not inadvertently fixing one problem but causing another. And so to make sure that you're able to do that every single time, every single change, then it's really worth it to invest up front in the infrastructure to connect your requirements to your software testing so that becomes a very easy thing to do.
Hello, hi. I have a question to Bogdan. You have mentioned the interaction and the lack of communication between autonomous vehicles and the other road users. So I would like to ask what might be solution, for example, to the lack of communication between the AVs and the pedestrians or other road users.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. The interactions that we are considering primarily in the Automotive Research Center is between the users of the autonomous system and the system itself, right? Because it's the soldiers and the vehicles, for example, soldiers and systems. And there, the interaction modalities right now are very limited, right? So enhanced haptic interactions, enhanced sensing that are focusing on physiological conditions of the human at that particular moment. Those are important elements. Another element that this is sort of looking inward into the system that is operating with humans and autonomy. If you look outward, the biggest challenge is, of course, predicting intent of other agents in the environment. And so in that area, we are starting to use generative AI technologies to try to address that, to have a better ability to predict intent, especially when it comes to interaction between autonomous systems and a human that might be a pedestrian or some other agent in the environment. So I think developing this hardware in the loop, as you mentioned, is also a very important component of that development, right? If you're trying to look at what new sensors could be installed in the vehicle, for example, to understand when a driver might be frustrated because the vehicle is braking too soon, right? How those technologies could work, doing that in simulation first is of course, accelerating technological development. So those are some of the solutions that we are pursuing right now. But I think it's two-sided. One is what kind of physical information gets exchanged, and then how that information is being processed.
Hi, this is Rini Shorni from Toyota. This question is for Kathleen from JD Power. So you mentioned about the consumer lower confidence, especially not liking some of the advanced technology right now in a lot of cars on the road, like automatic emergency braking. But I'm sure you're familiar that NHTSA just issued their FMVSS, which is a regulation that all cars has to have not only the forward AB, but also pedestrian AB by 2029, 100%. And based on the past discussions and voluntary agreement, most of the OEMs are already doing it. And these systems have shown to significantly reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities. So what do you think consumers need to have more confidence in these systems? Because we know that regular people are not the best drivers.
No, and there's a number of forward collision crashes, right? But I think it's a little bit what we're talking about just a minute ago is the fact that it's how the vehicle is communicating with the consumer is one part of it, right? So these frequent warnings, they start to get annoying to customers. In fact, it's one of the biggest complaints with forward AEB is the number of warnings they're getting. They feel like they're not necessary and they're a bit distracting to them. So trying to find a way to communicate things to them, maybe through, haptic instead of, warnings, other ways, maybe, having the ability for them to have more options so that, maybe they get the warning a little bit later if they feel more confident in that technology and in their driving than having it be more frequent. And also I know as the technology starts to improve, right, we'll have less false positives, because that's one of the complaints too, right, is there's a lot of false positives and the brakes go on and it's frightening for them when that braking happens when they're not expecting it. So, and the third thing I think is really trying to educate consumers more about these technologies would really help them have a better appreciation for it. And we know this is a really difficult task because at delivery there's really about a 30-minute sweet spot for the dealer to, get them signed up on their mobile app, trying to get their first service appointment. There's a lot of things to go through. So teaching all these technologies is very difficult, and there's an information overload. But if there's a way that we can start to educate them a little bit better on the importance of these technologies, I think they will start to see that forward collision is as important as reverse AEB.
Do you mind if I add something to that?
Of course.
And again, going back to the idea of having these amazing brains in this room here today, I want to challenge you with something coming out of here today, this session, everything that you do in life. I want to challenge you to stop thinking like engineers and start thinking like humans. Stop developing solutions as engineers and start developing solutions as humans. Use your engineering knowledge, everything that you've learned, all the automation that you've come up with. But what I noticed is that one of these problems, if you had come and asked a number of people with how distracted the vehicle is, we have a lot of distractions in there. From a city perspective, we're looking at all these different multimodal things that are happening there, a lot of data coming into our dashboards. But what we notice is that sometimes more is not always better, and you need to have the right amount of more and the right amount of messaging that is coming through on every single level, whether it's a Cavnue solution that's there or a self-driving message that's coming in. And I think this is how you kind of approach this, I'm assuming. You're trying to find the right amount of information to the right amount of person for the right element that comes out of it with some of your different level solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. We work very closely with our OEM and AV partners because you said it right. Too much information is not always better. You have to be very careful about the information you share, how you share it, how quickly a human can digest that information so that you're not distraction. You don't want to be a distraction. You're trying to do just the opposite.
So I have to follow up on that. I think safety is not only just vehicles, right? We look at from infrastructure support perspective as well. And so, Todd, from your perspective, what would be your thoughts on in terms of the safe systems approach? It's not just the vehicle itself, just the infrastructure itself. What about system approach?
Yeah. To me, the challenge is, and I guess you have to know your goal. So for us, it's safety is our primary goal, right? So it's a systems engineering problem. We're humans, but we are a system engineering problem. Actually, NTSB and USDOT have done a good job kind of quantifying a different approach to looking at solving or addressing that problem. They call it the safe systems approach or methodology. And it's safe people, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care. Those are the 5 key tenets of their approach. So it really is, you can't, well, what it does is you have to acknowledge, number one, that humans are going to make mistakes. They do, we all do. You need redundancies in the systems, and the system has to work together to prevent bad things from happening. So for us, we feel this is a perfect catalyst to leverage all the great advancements in vehicle technology and all the autonomous driving systems and technology that's coming with the roads, right? So the roads are pretty much concrete steel right now, but to provide information that helps those vehicles, helps those people, notifies somebody of a pedestrian next to a freeway, a mile ahead, right? So at least people can start to be prepared for why is that pedestrian there at a minimum. But it's taken that systems engineering approach to the problem to hopefully make meaningful change.
So I know Calvin signaled me we have 10 seconds to end the panel. We have such a distinguished panel and from different sectors. I know you all have many questions you might want to ask. But we're going to follow this panel with a break, and so that the audience will have a chance to ask them individual questions. Again, I want to thank you so much for your participation in the panel, and I hope everyone enjoyed the break. Thank you.